welcome to the Art of Being Human. We've been talking about bullies and bullying behavior, how to stop it, what happens to a child psychologically when they've been bullied, how often it happens, and I want to continue with that today, and I'm going into the psychology of the bullier themselves. Not only does a child who's bullied need help, but the person who's a bullier needs help too, because as I discussed on the last on the last program, a lot of the bullying behavior, if it's not stopped, a child will actually turn to crime. And about 60% of the people who are bullies and they are not stopped actually become felons or at least spend some jail time. So I want to continue with this today. Let's take a look at the boys who are the bullies, not the people being bullied, but the children who are doing the bullying. The bullies, they're usually larger than average size. Remember what I've said about people who actually act as bullies. They don't want to stop it because they're proud of themselves. A lot of children come to them because they are powerful, because they seem to be strong, and so they want to be friends of the bullier. So there's no real reason why a bullier would want to stop bullying. But the thing is, as they grow older and they don't stop the bullying behavior, children start to draw away from them because they don't want to be involved with them anymore. They don't like what they're doing. They know that what they're doing is wrong, and so they start to lose friends. But the problem is the bullier keeps on doing it. They never get the message that this is inappropriate behavior because they're not taught somehow in a way that they can understand that this is not appropriate behavior. But the boys who bully are larger than average size, and they use force, a lot of kicking, a lot of punching, a lot of things like that that are really inappropriate. Girls who bully do it a little differently. They're verbally assertive. They make fun of their victims. And, you're stupid. We don't like you. You're ugly. We wish you weren't here. Why don't you do something to get rid of yourself? You're not worth knowing. Just really, really, really painful things. And what you have to understand is that emotional wounds due to verbal bullying is just as awful and just as damaging to a child as any kind of bullying that's physical. Yes, the physical bullying hurts. You get kicked, you get punched. But to be told that you're worthless psychologically does as much damage to you as it does as if you were being hit. So how do you know if your child is actually being bullied? Well, there are some things you can look for because they may not tell you. It seems odd maybe to most people that a child wouldn't tell them if they were being bullied, but they don't. And a lot of times they're afraid to. They're afraid if their parents take action, the bullying will become worse. They're afraid that their parents will consider them weak and maybe not a good child because they can't stand up for themselves. And they're afraid maybe that their parents will blame them, and so therefore they will be punished for that, and so they're bullied further, and they're punished further. And none of these things should ever exist. A child should not have to depend completely upon themselves to protect themselves. That's what parents are for. Parents are there to stand up for the child when the child cannot stand up for themselves. And it's not anything that's bad if a child can't stand up for themselves because they're children, they're not adults. They can't be expected to do things that adults would do. They can't be expected to understand things that an adult can understand. And who wants to become a bully if you're bullied, Violence used against a person who is violent does not solve violent behavior. It only adds to it. So bullying the bully doesn't prove anything. It only increases the bullying behavior by the bully, and now has started bullying behavior by the person who's fighting against it. That is absolutely not the way to take care of it. And a child cannot figure all this out for themselves. They don't have the mental ability to do so because their brains aren't mature yet. So how would you know if your child is being bullied? Well, do they have bad dreams? Do they talk to you about bad dreams? Are they lacking in friends? People don't go to their house. People don't befriend them. You know, most children love to have children come to their house to play after school. If this is not happening, if they come home and their clothes are ripped, something's happened to them. If their books are torn, or if they are physically bruised. Now, you know, if I had a child and they came home and they had bruises on their body and their clothes were torn and their books were torn, I would have some questions. I would have a lot of questions. But the way I would phrase it is, you know, this is happening to you and I don't know what happened to cause this, but I see that you're bruised. I can see that your that your clothes are torn. What is going on? What has somebody hurt you? Has somebody touched you in an inappropriate way? And I would encourage the child to talk to me about what went on. And then I would take action, but I would take action in such a way that the child wouldn't just get more bullying in response. You have to be careful of situations like this because you don't want the child to get it worse. Oh, you went to your mother and your father. Oh, you're weak because you went to your mother and your father. Well, now I'm going to bully you worse. I'm going to hurt you worse. I'm going to hit you more. You know, so you have to be careful how this is approached. I have no objection to a parent taking their child out of school if they're being bullied and harassed until the problem has been solved. It's not a permanent fix, but there are other ways to get an education. If your child is being hurt, then why have it continue? You know, some children are hurt for years. They're being bullied for years, until finally they can't take it anymore and they actually attempt suicide. And there's no reason to put up with it like that. So I will take this down. Now here's some terms you may not be aware of. Unpopular children are the children who mainly become bullied. And they are classed as two classes, aggressively rejected or withdrawn rejected. These children are rejected by their classmates. They're picked on. Sometimes one child is scapegoated. That means that that particular child is picked on by everybody else. And the reason they're picked on is they happen to be the weak one, the small one, the one that seems to be not able to defend themselves. So what happens is that people pick on them. So it's classed in two ways, aggressive rejected. If a child is rejected, and it's aggressive rejected because they are disliked because they are aggressive, they are confrontive, nobody wants to be with them. In other words, they tend to be bullies themselves, but they're bullying because they've been bullied usually, but they're disliked because they're aggressive and they're confrontive, and people just don't want to be with them. There is the withdrawn rejected, and I think this is probably more prominent. They're disliked because they are withdrawn, they're quiet, they're anxious, they're socially isolated, they're lonely, they're unhappy, they have low self-esteem, they appear to be weak, they appear to be vulnerable. And so it's just a natural thing to bully a child who seems not to be quite up to the characteristics of the rest of the children. Now, it's not unusual to have a child that's shy, that doesn't want to make a whole lot of friends, that's quiet, that has quiet interests, that would rather go to an orchestra rehearsal than a football game. That's not so unusual. And there's no reason that they should be bullied because of their own individual differences. Children are different just as adults are different. And some people are quieter, some people are more shy, some people just are quiet and withdrawn, and they would rather do art than do sports. And there's nothing wrong with those children. They're perfectly normal children. But if you have a group of children that are into sports, and I'm not blaming sports at all. I'm not saying that people that are into sports are necessarily bullies. But these children that seem stronger, these children that seem to be more determined, these children that seem to be more aggressive, as you would expect maybe on a playing field, these are the ones who will target a child that is weaker and start bullying them. But I have to be careful how I phrase this. I don't want anyone thinking that I believe that if a child has aggressive tendencies, who is sportsman-minded, that they want to have rough play, that they want to run, you know, and jump and do physical activities, they're not necessarily bullies. And the children who are shy and quiet and have other kinds of hobbies that aren't so aggressive, there's nothing necessarily wrong with them. They're not necessarily weak, but this is exactly what they are like. They are not as strong or physically strong or interested in the rough and tumble that other children in a class are. But they would be the ones that would be more targets for bullies who are seeking out those who are weaker because they want to hurt them, because they want to show them who's boss, because they want to show how strong they are. If you are very strong, then who are you going to pick on? You're not going to pick on another strong person who can go back at you, who can fight you back. You're going to fight those that are weaker, that are smaller. And so that's where it begins. So the withdrawn, rejected children are disliked because they are withdrawn and anxious and lonely, maybe unhappy, low self-esteem, this kind of thing. So they're vulnerable to the bullying behaviors of others. So in those two classes, you get children who are being bullied by others, either because they're not liked because they're too strong or they're not liked because they're too weak. Now, the aggressively rejected children, those who are rejected because they seem very large and very strong, they do not understand why they are not liked. They tend to be impulsive, they tend to be immature, they tend to misinterpret social situations. So a compliment to them may be sarcasm. Oh, you did a wonderful job today. Or they don't believe the compliment. Oh, you're just making fun of me. You don't think I'm doing well enough, so you're making a sarcastic remark. They just don't have a sense of reality in terms of what other children are saying and what it means. If they're playing and their foot gets stepped on or their shoe gets stepped on, they interpret that as a definite, deliberate act, not an accident. As children are playing in the playground, of course, their feet are going to get stepped on. They're going to get bumped into and all of this. But an aggressively rejected child who feels that they're being targeted and who seem to be unpopular because they are so impulsive and immature, they're going to interpret that behavior not as an accident or just something that happens on a playground. What they're going to interpret it as a definite act against them. And that's part of the reason they're not liked. They're not liked because nobody can do anything with them without having them feel that this is bad. This is a bad thing. They're doing this against me. They're deliberately stepping on my foot. They're deliberately throwing the ball and hitting me. And it may just be an accident and nothing more. But they're not so much in touch with reality that they can understand that. And the person who is withdrawn, rejected, they're targeted because they're weak. They don't tempt anybody. They don't go out and throw balls in the play yard. They don't do anything that's going to cause a child to react against them. And that actually does react against them because people don't feel that they're strong enough. If they're not strong enough, let's show them how to be strong. Let's be strong against them. Let's pick on them. I've talked to you before about inward and outward aggression. If a person feels frustrated, if they are upset about something, that has to be expressed. And if it's expressed by outward aggression, those people will bully. I don't like what happened to me, I'm going to go out and hit somebody. Well, they may not be thinking in that kind of way, but that's what their behavior would indicate. I'm upset because somebody hit me with a ball at school. Well, I'm going to show somebody what I'm like, and then they cuff somebody, they throw somebody down. It is really, really a difficult thing to do. I knew a boy who tried to cut off somebody else's hand because he was so angry at him, and the other boy really didn't do anything wrong. But this boy didn't like school. They thought if he did something really assertive and really aggressive, that he would be kicked out of school. So we deliberately tried to cut off somebody's hand to do that. This is an actual case. It's not a counseling case, I didn't counsel him or anything, but this is somebody that I was aware of. So it's mismanaged aggression. It's somebody hurts me, I hurt them back. It's mismanaged aggression. Now, here's an example of what happened to a boy that was being bullied. He was called names. This happens frequently. All of his pencils in school were broken. His books were tossed on the floor. He was made fun of when he answered teachers' questions, and here the teacher should have just stepped in and stopped it at that point. It should have been obvious to the teacher that something was going on. And they can be attacked in the bathroom. This boy was attacked in the bathroom. What happened with him was that he had his head pushed down into the toilet. And this was happening like on a daily basis. These children who are bullied, it's really tough stuff. It's really assertive, aggressive. It's not good at all. And it happens every day. It happens for months. It happens for weeks. It can happen for years. And sometimes the parent and sometimes the teachers just never know, because the child doesn't say, I am being bullied. I need help with this. And the teachers can't do everything. They can't be everywhere at once. They can't see everything at once. They can't have eyes on the back of their heads as well as the front of their heads. There's no way that a teacher can monitor everything, but there should be monitors in the school that will monitor everything so that children don't get away with bullying behavior. They should be stopped immediately. Well, this poor boy, after all of these things happened to him, he attempted suicide, and his parents found him unconscious. And this was the first time that the parents knew anything about the bullying behavior that was done to their child. If they had open communication with a child and they saw the child getting quieter and quieter, more to themselves, not having children over, or they're bruised, or something's happening, they're upset, they don't seem happy, they seem sullen, that's the time to be asking questions. What's happening to you in school? I want to know what's happening to you in school. And I'm not going to get angry about anything you tell me. You don't even have to worry about that. But tell me what's happening, because it should be obvious that something is happening. They may not come out and say, oh, I'm being bullied. But if you can watch their behavior, especially if there are changes in their behavior and they're not behaving like they normally would, they're not happy like they used to be, there's also a chance, of course, that they're using drugs, because if a child changes, it's one of the things that happens when a child is using drugs. But I'm not focusing on that now. I'm focusing on bullying behavior. You do get that withdrawal. You do get that, I don't want to play. I'll stay in my room. I'll watch television. I'll stare into space, all of that. But you don't have a child coming to their parents and saying, something's wrong at school. I'm upset about it. I don't know what to do about it. Please help me. They're saying it by their behavior, even if they're not saying it by their words. And at this point, you do not expect a young child to be able to verbalize like an adult does. You do not expect a young child to be able to handle things like an adult would. And it is up to the parent to be there for the children. It's what parents are for. They don't, don't just send your child to school, assume that the child is okay. He comes home, he seems upset. He'll get over it. A lot of parents think that bullying is just a part of growing up, but it's much, much more serious than that. It can really damage a child's psychology, and as a result of that, a child won't want to go to school. A child will not be able to study. They won't be able to learn, and children usually just love to learn. So you have to keep that in mind. This child attempted suicide, and that was the first time that the parents knew anything about it. What I think I'll do here, I'm going to get into how to intervene if your child is being bullied. I'm going to get into how to intervene, but I think I'm going to wait for the next segment, because once I get into it, I hate to just talk about it for 2 or 3 minutes and then have to stop. But we'll get into that, and I also want to get into the teacher's responsibility. I think sometimes we give all of the responsibility of child management and the growing up years to the teacher, and we expect way too much out of the teacher than what they can give. But the teacher needs to be watchful. A teacher needs to know what's going on. He may not be able to intervene in every situation, but at least they need to know if a child senses or looks like they need help, and they need to ask their own questions and have specialists available to help a child if they're being bullied. I know, because I've done some of these interventions myself. So I'll close it here. We'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.